Hello again, ReLIVE fans. Welcome back for another Should You Pull, Should You Ban video. This time, we're actually talking about a stage girl being released for challenge review support. Just yesterday, or last night, Tristan Maya was put into our games as a new defeatable boss, and with it, A-Team gave us a challenge review support banner, starting with Flower, featuring the stage girl Akikaze Rui being cast as the historical nurse Nightingale. Without further ado, let's jump into her stats and acts to figure out what to expect. As always, for whatever reason, A-Team never shows what the 6-star Nightingale Akikaze Rui will have. Only what at 4 stars and rank 9 and level 60 and bond level 20 she will have. But even at her max, so I'm talking about 6 stars and bond level 30 and level 80, her stats are pretty subpar for what we've come to expect. Her HP is decent in the 20,000s, just barely, but her act power is just barely above average in considering all stage girls. Her physical defense is below average. Her special defense just barely sneaks into the 4 digits at 1056. And her speed is probably the most notable stat. It's at 1784, which is just a tad bit slower than girls like Hifumi and Hound Ruko and Marion, and a good bit slower than girls like Snow White and Dorothy. So she's kind of on that fast end, but she won't win many races against the faster girls, if that makes any sense. But it's not really her stats that tell the story about who she is. It's more her acts. Slash of Brilliance is always, I'm a big fan of having a Slash of Brilliance, so that really helps charging her. But her next 2 moves, both 2 AP, she gets a Power Crept Dim solo. Speaking of Houndrico, it's only 2 AP for that. But it, however, only affects, so maybe it's not Power Crept, only affects the front enemy. So to some extent, maybe not too useful, especially because Dim Solo, and Houndrico users will know this, oftentimes charges the girl it affects. So it's kind of a double-edged sword and usually hits you first. So not too useful in PvP typically, especially when we're considering who she might be going up against. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. The next one is Soothing Solo, which is low damage to front enemy, but counter heal. Again, just to one person though. We've kind of got accustomed to Snow White giving the counter heal to the front 3. But Nightingale does that counter heal, but only for the front girl. So it looks like she's very single target heavy. Looking at her climax act, it's not an attack, and it removes exit. This is something, it revives someone. So as opposed to Thumbelina and to some extent Miku, you're not waiting for the girl to be knocked out to revive her. You're waiting for them to be knocked out and then use your act. If that makes sense. It's not a buff that goes on her beforehand. It's something you do after she's already been, how we say, killed, but in game terms, after she's been forced to exit the review. She gives HP recovery and act power up to all allies. That is a pretty decently good buff. It's 10% of HP, but 30% increased act. That's that same kind of buff that Marie gives. So pretty good. Her unit skill is Flower, Flower Global, and her auto skills, she gets 10 Brilliance, so she can climax right away, but why would you do that, right, in PvP? She has Evade, that's always nice, but not nearly as good anymore because everyone seems to be running Perfect Aim, and Confusion Resistance is nice. So when we're talking about how we would use her, well, 10 Brilliance is nice, but you need to wait for your front girl to go down. And how often will that be happening? Who are you running at the front? And what are your opponents running that you'd want to slow down their Brilliance recovery? When we start thinking about these questions, it becomes clearer and clearer that Nightingale Akikaze Rui is not a PvP-oriented stage girl. She is very much a PvE-oriented, which shouldn't be a surprise given this is a challenge review support banner, and I can't think of the last challenge review support girl that was actually relevant in PvP. Zoro might actually be the best one, and depending on who you talk to, she might be criticized pretty heavily too. So with Nightingale, as far as how I would use her in PvP, if I were forced to, I would probably give her some survivability. So that would be something like 2 fortitude, or some sort of like maybe agility, so she goes first so she can bring some girls up before she herself gets hit. But it's hard to imagine exactly how she would fit into a team, especially a mid-row team, when she's back row and she has to wait for the front stage girl or any front stage girl to go down. Usually at that point you're kind of screwed. You shouldn't be waiting for your opponent to punch you. You need to be able to punch them first, or be in a punching fight so that by the time you get to the brawl, you're not trying to catch up. So talking about should you pull, for PvP, absolutely not. And even for PvE, I would probably still recommend against it unless you're happy getting any of these stage girls between Nightingale, between Merlin, Zoro, and Piper. Because they do share the banner, if I can find it. And what I mean by the share the banner is here. Okay, so you see Tamamo no Mai, who's useless for this, Mona Lisa, Zoro, Merlin, Nightingale, Pied Piper, they all have a 0.2% rate up. Which means you could spend, I don't know, like 60,000 gems and would still be unlikely to get her. So please, please, please do not pull on this banner. Let her spook you. If you desperately want her, yeah, you can go ahead. I mean, I'm not going to stop you. But she is Brilliance Fest, so you can use tickets. And you have just as high a likelihood of getting her as you have of getting a girl like Jekyll. So use those tickets. That would be my recommendation instead of gems. If you see her in PvP, should you ban? No. No, there are way more important things to ban. I would put her, tier 8 is considered damage dealers, but she's strictly in tier 8. I would ban Augusta before I ban Nightingale. She's not going to be that big of a problem to deal with. So I hope I kept this a little bit shorter. I hadn't looked at the time. But that's all I have to say about this. If you do go after her, good luck in your polls and good luck in your reviews. I will see you later.